Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Sauce. NFL Week 12 continues. Broncos, Raiders in Vegas. Let's do it.
Welcome to The Sauce. The Sauce. Sauce. Hey, get the sauce.
All right, like I said, Denver's on the road in Las Vegas for this one. The Raiders are catching looks like 6 across the board here. Total sitting at 41 or 41.5, depending on your sports book. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Denver side. Over 75% of the tickets and about 95% of the money coming in on the Broncos, but as always, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Broncos offense against the Raiders defense. Denver, slight edge here, but Broncos offense hasn't been all that good this year. They're 21st in yards per play, 19th in success rate. Passing, they're 23rd and 25th. Rushing, 17th and 15th. Raiders have some decent numbers in terms of yardage, but when it comes to success rate, EPA, DVOA, some of the more advanced metrics, this is not a great defense. No new injuries on the Denver side. They're still missing Josh Reynolds, but he's missed a few games now. Other than that, Broncos are going to be good to go. Got a few question marks in the secondary for the Raiders. We'll have to wait and see on those. There are 4 starters missing from this Raiders defense, but that's not new. All 4 of these guys have been out for some time. So we'll have to wait and see on the question marks in the Raiders secondary. As far as the front 7, it's going to be the same unit we've seen from the Raiders in recent weeks. So what do we think about this matchup for Bo Nix? Well, the good news is the Raiders do not have much of a pass rush. They're 30th in pressure rate, 22nd in adjusted sack rate. Bo Nix under pressure has been, he's 4.1 yards per pass attempt. That's 39th in the NFL. 53 passer rating. That's 36th in the NFL. So Bo Nix has not been great when pressured this year. Not that he's set the world on fire from a clean pocket. 28th in yards per pass attempt, 19th in passer rating. But no question, he's been significantly better when given a clean pocket. So the fact that the Raiders haven't had much of a pass rush so far this year, it's definitely good news for Denver and for Bo Nix. Also, the Denver offensive line's done a great job in pass protection so far this year. 15th in pressure rate allowed, 2nd in pass blocking grade, 4th in adjusted sack rate. So Bo Nix should have clean pockets to throw from in this game. Another angle for Bo Nix in this one, the Raiders do run a decent amount of man coverage. This one's kind of thin. They're 11th in man coverage frequency, 31.2% of the time. So really nothing here. That's a slightly above average amount of man coverage. But Bo Nix is slightly better against man coverage. This one's razor thin. Really nothing to take away from here. It was on the timeline. I figured I'd share it. Really nothing to take away from this one. Kind of the same thing with this angle here. The Raiders run a lot of too high safety looks, 52.2%. That's 7th most in the NFL. Bo Nix has been slightly better against single high safeties. In fact, he's 35th in yards per pass attempt against 2 high safeties. So I guess that would be a slight detriment to Bo Nix in this spot, but I don't think there's anything to take away from either of those. This one kind of is interesting, though. Look at the passing depth here. The Raiders defense, very bad against the short pass, pretty bad against the intermediate pass, average against the deep pass. Reason I'm bringing this up, look at the left side of this graphic. You'll see Bo Nix's strongest passing depth is the deep pass. A- in frequency, A- in DVOA. Not as great throwing the intermediate pass and the short pass. Again, probably thin here as well. Thought it was interesting enough to share. In my opinion, if you are looking to back the Broncos here, this is the one you're most worried about. So if you're betting the Raiders, you're probably looking at this right here. Bo Nix has not been nearly as efficient on the road. At home, the Broncos are averaging 258 passing yards per game, 7.8 yards per attempt, 54.4% success rate per dropback, an average pass rating of 106. Look at their numbers on the road. 169.7 yards per game, 5.3 yards per attempt, an average pass rating of 78.6. Bo Nix has not been nearly as good in his road games. He's been much better at home in Mile High. And also, what happened to the Broncos' run game? In weeks 3 through 7, there was a 5-game stretch where Denver was running the ball, over 143 rushing yards per game, 5.4 yards per carry. Look at their last 4 games. 102.5 rushing yards per game, 3.8 yards per carry, 31.4% success rate per rush is terrible. Yes, there are games against Kansas City and Baltimore in there, 2 elite run defenses, but there's also games against Carolina and Atlanta, two terrible run defenses. So Denver not getting the same production in terms of a rushing attack in the last few games. And the Raiders defense starting to look like the elite run defense we saw down the stretch after Antonio Pierce took over the head coaching job last year. Look at their last 3 games, allowing less than 100 yards per game, 3.69 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 40%. The Raiders have been defending the run. Yeah, I know one of those games was against Kansas City. They can't really run the ball. Same goes for Cincinnati. But last week they went on the road to Miami. The Dolphins can certainly run the ball. This Raiders run defense is looking pretty good, man. Not to mention, where have the Broncos found most of their success in the run game so far this year? Gap concept blocking scheme, 7th in yards per carry, 7th in success rate. That happens to play directly into the strength of the Raiders defense. They're actually terrible against zone blocking schemes, but against gap blocking schemes, 10th in the NFL in yards per carry allowed, 2nd in success rate per rush. I think the Raiders defense is going to give Bo Nix and this Broncos offense problems. I don't know if they're able to run the ball. Bo Nix not nearly as good on the road. I can't believe I'm saying this. I like the matchup for the Raiders defense. I think they're going to play well. But now we flip it over to the other side and we look at the matchup for the Raiders offense. And this is where things get a little dark if you're trying to back the Raiders here. I mean, obviously the Raiders offense, 29th in yards per play, 24th in success rate. Passing numbers are pretty bad. Rushing numbers worse than the NFL, and it's not close. Against a Broncos defense that might be top 5 in the NFL. They actually lead the NFL. They're 1st in yards per play, 5th in overall success rate. This is what we call a mismatch. Look at the discrepancy here between the Raiders offensive line and the Broncos defensive front. The Raiders are dead last in adjusted line yards, literally 32nd, 28th in run blocking grade, 30th in yards before contact, against a Broncos defensive line that's 6th, 5th, and 1st. Yeah, again, mismatch. But now we get to the injury reports, and this is where things get a little interesting here. Here's the Broncos defense. Nothing new here. Singleton's been out. That's not new. Safety Brandon Jones is listed as questionable. We'll have to wait and see for him. But in terms of the front 7, it's going to be the same unit for the Broncos that we've seen in previous weeks. Now let's flip it over to the Raiders offense and check this out. Look at the offensive line. Mumford is back at right tackle. He's definitely back. Andre James, the center, might be back. He hasn't played. He got injured in week 8. Cody Whitehair might be back. So the center and the left guard, neither of them have played since week 8. They actually, I believe they both got injured in the same game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they both got injured in week 8. They both might be back. They're listed as questionable. We don't know for sure, but there's a chance the Raiders are getting 3 starters back on the offensive line this week. In addition to that, Michael Mayer is back at tight end. So they got Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, both those tight ends out there. Now, Alex Madison's questionable. Zamir White's questionable. I don't know if this means we can count on the Raiders to run the ball. In fact, that seems kind of crazy. I'm just saying getting 3 starters back on the offensive line, that's something. Now, you might be looking at the recent passing production from the Raiders and thinking, Kyle, I like Gardner Minshew in this spot. I mean, in their last 3 games, he's been pretty good. 101.7 passer rating, 6.6 yards per attempt isn't any good, but 61.9% success rate is excellent. 229.7. I mean, I don't trust Minshew. Yes, we've seen him play a little bit better in the last few games. He made some throws against the Chiefs. He made some throws against the Dolphins as well. In fact, those were 2 of his best games of the year, the Chiefs and the Dolphins game. Let's give Minshew some credit. That being said, you might want to pump the brakes before putting your faith in Gardner Minshew in this spot. The Broncos run a lot of single high safety looks, 7th most in the NFL. They also run a lot of cover 1, which is kind of the same. I mean, they go hand in hand. So 7th in cover 1 frequency, 7th in single high safety frequency. Gardner Minshew against single high safeties, significantly worse. His numbers against 2 high safeties are actually pretty good. 3rd, 20th, 14th, 3rd. Look at those same statistics against single high safeties, 26th, 28th, 35th, and 31st. One of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And check out his numbers against cover 1. This is disgusting. 30th, 37th, 37th, 31st. That's amongst 37 qualified quarterbacks. So he's dead last in passer rating, dead last in big time throw rate against cover 1. So I know Gardner Minshew has put together a couple decent games recently. I don't trust him against the Broncos defense. I will say, though, if they get those 3 starters back on the offensive line, I don't think it's crazy that the Raiders are able to move the ball a bit, though. So I don't necessarily hate the matchup for the Raiders, but certainly don't like it. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, I can tell you straight up, I'm not laying 6 points on the road with the Broncos. Bo Nix has been pretty bad on the road. Not laying 6 points here. So it would only be Raiders. Whether or not I place the bet is going to depend on the injury reports. There's question marks in the Raiders secondary. There's question marks on the Raiders offensive line. I need answers to those questions. I'm down to take the Raiders here. I just need to know that I'm getting at least a few of those pieces back. So it'll be Raiders +6, Raiders +6.5. I'll let you know. Let's keep our eyes on the injury report here, but it's only Raiders for me here. If you'd like to see all the bets I currently have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. Live show, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time is the college football show. 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday is the NFL show. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.